Hello, hello, it's Monday from our studios in Southern California. This is RUNTALK. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Karp. On today's show, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit difficult to describe in words, but I wanted to give an episode all about the feeling of running. These days, most runners run with a GPS on their wrist, and it's easy to get caught up in the data that the GPS gives you. Everyone's glancing at their watch to see their pace, and that takes you away from understanding the feeling of running. And so I want to talk about the feeling of different kinds of workouts, and that's why it's a little bit difficult to describe. I took on a difficult topic today because sometimes it's hard to describe exactly what something would feel like. Hello, Nicole. Thanks for joining RUNTALK from our fancy studios in Southern California. So today's episode is all about the feeling of different kinds of workouts and what you should strive for when you try to do different kinds of workouts. So I figured the way we're going to do this, we'll start from the slowest speed that you would run and work our way up to faster and faster workouts, and then talk about what they're supposed to feel like so that when you wear your GPS, that you don't get so tied up in what the data is telling you that you can understand the feeling. And as I discuss the different kinds of workouts, I'll talk about why this is so important to understand that feel. Hello, Christopher. Thanks for joining. Christopher comes every week. He's like my biggest fan. Welcome. We're on Facebook and Instagram with this, so whichever platform you're viewing this from, thank you for joining us. This is our 39th episode. I've been doing this for 39 straight Mondays. So thank you for joining us. So let's talk about the first slowest speed that you would run is just your walk out the door easy running speed. The single biggest mistake that runners make is taking their easy runs too fast. And there's many reasons why you should run easy on your easy days. One is so that you can over time accumulate more volume of training, because the volume is really important. So if every day you're walking out the door and running at too fast of a pace, you're going to put a cap on the volume, the ability to increase that volume over time. The second reason is injury prevention. You always want to run the slowest that you need to run to meet the purpose of the workout. So if you're always running faster than what you need to run, you're accumulating more stress. With every footfall, you're accumulating more stress over time, and that could potentially lead to injury. And the third reason is so that you are fully recovered when it's time to run fast. So like if you have an interval workout tomorrow, but today you ran your easy run too quickly, you're not going to be able to get as much out of that interval workout tomorrow because you're coming into that workout on fatigued legs. So there's three reasons why you need to slow down the easy run. So how should the easy runs feel? One of the best ways I could describe it is gentle. And the people that I coach, I'm always writing that. I laugh when I say this because I'm always writing that on the schedule, that today do 5 miles gentle. And I emphasize that word gentle. Your easy days should feel gentle. You should feel when you get done with the run, you should feel like you could have run a heck of a lot longer at that same pace. So there should be no fatigue from these easy runs, except for long runs. Then the duration is what fatigues you, not the pace. And so think about when you do your easy runs, that if you were to extend them out longer, that it's the duration that you're running, not the pace, that is causing the fatigue. So easy runs should feel gentle. They should almost feel invigorating. You should feel almost better when you get done with the run than you did before the run. You should be able, you hear this comment a lot, this piece of advice a lot, that you should be able to hold a conversation. So if you are running with somebody else, or even if you're talking out loud to yourself, sometimes crazy people, I'm one of those people, talk out loud to yourself like I'm doing now. The people are watching, so thank you for attending. But you should feel like you could hold an entire conversation without having to constantly stop and take a breath. If you notice that you have to constantly stop and take a breath in order to get another sentence out, then you know you're running too fast. And so I could give pacing guidelines, but I don't want to. I want to talk about the feel, because there are pacing guidelines for all these kinds of workouts. But it's better if you understand what the feeling is. You want to get to the point, the whole goal of this is that you want to get to the point that if someone were to say to you, go out and run 7-minute pace, or go out and run 8-minute pace, or go out and run 6-minute pace, that you should be able to do that without ever looking at your watch. You want to develop this internal clock, because when you get to the starting line of a race, that's going to be extremely important. Because when the gun goes off, the biggest mistake people make is they go out too fast, and then they slow down during the latter portion of the race. But if you have developed this feeling, this internal clock that you know what these paces feel like, then that prevents you from making that mistake that so many runners make. So the easy run should feel gentle. They should feel uplifting. They should feel purely aerobic. Your legs should only get tired because of the duration. But if you're not running that long, if you're going on a 30-minute run or a 60-minute run, then you should feel very good at the end of the run. You should feel invigorated. The run itself should not be fatiguing you. Okay? So gentle, comfortable, be able to hold a conversation, and feel invigorated from the run. The next fastest pace are the threshold workouts, lactate threshold, or I often call it acidosis threshold, because it's the speed, the maximum speed above which you start to develop metabolic acidosis, and you drop the pH of the muscle, and that starts to become fatiguing. So the threshold is the speed at which that does not happen yet. You don't develop acidosis, but it's the maximum speed at which it's still aerobic. And so those runs should feel comfortably hard, whether you do it as an interval workout, like maybe you do mile reps or 800-meter reps, or you do it as a continuous tempo run. It doesn't matter. The feeling should feel comfortably hard. It should feel at the upper end of it being purely aerobic. And it takes some practice to know what that feels like. So with that kind of a workout or that kind of a run, maybe you can speak in one sentence at a time before you have to stop and take a breath to get out another sentence. But these too should feel invigorating because it's still aerobic. So again, think of the duration is what causes the fatigue, not the intensity. It's not the pace. If you're feeling uncomfortable because of the pace, then you know you're running too fast. It should feel comfortably hard at the upper end of being purely aerobic, and it still should be invigorating. It should only be fatiguing because of the duration that you are trying to hold the pace, not because of the pace itself. And that's very important because you want those kinds of workouts to remain aerobic. And once you cross over to the other side and you start to introduce a slightly anaerobic contribution, then it's going to be fatiguing because of the intensity, because of the pace, no longer because of the volume, because of the duration. And so the threshold workout should be comfortably hard, emphasis on comfortable, that's why that word goes first, comfortably hard, rather than we'll get to something else that'll be hard but comfortable. But comfortably hard, these threshold workouts are. Maybe you can talk in one sentence at a time before you need to stop to take a breath. And it should be invigorating. It should only be fatiguing because of the duration, not because of the pace. Okay? The next fastest speed, well, let me go back because I also prescribe other kinds of workouts that are threshold workouts. I call them threshold plus because they're slightly faster than threshold pace. So there's where the hard but comfortable comes in. If threshold is comfortably hard, then threshold plus, which the goal of that workout is still to train your threshold. So if your threshold is here, you're going to run these threshold plus workouts just a hair above threshold pace. Not all the way out here, just a hair above, so that the anaerobic contribution is so slight, it's almost imperceptible. And so that would feel hard but comfortable. So it's slightly challenging because of the pace, but it's still close enough to threshold pace that it's not so taxing. You should still be able to accumulate a lot of volume in the workout if you were to do it as an interval workout. Like one workout I prescribe a lot is, 800-meter reps, so half-mile reps at slightly faster than threshold pace, only a hair above threshold pace. So it's hard but comfortable, but you're only doing it half-mile reps at a time before you do another one. I wouldn't do that kind of a workout continuously. I would stick with the threshold at threshold pace continuously because it's going to be fatiguing just because of the duration that you're holding the pace. So threshold plus workouts, interval workouts that's slightly faster than threshold pace, those should feel hard but comfortable. Okay? So it's a nuance of a difference. And again, this is why it's a little bit difficult to explain how this should feel, because you have to experience this feeling. And it's very important to understand what it feels like. But you should be able to do it. If you know where your threshold is, then you should know what's slightly faster than the threshold feeling is. Okay? So it takes some practice to understand that feeling. And with all of these kinds of workouts, use the GPS to match it with your feeling, because the GPS gives you the data. Once you have the data, then you can associate that feeling with the data, and you say, oh yeah, this is how this pace feels. I'm getting the pace off my watch, and this is how it feels. And then you match up that data with the feeling, and then you can do it on your own. Then you don't need to rely on a GPS. You know, for a long time, GPSs didn't exist. We all had to learn what the pace felt like. And so sometimes ignore the GPS and go by the feeling. But in the beginning, when you're learning how to do this, it's very helpful because you have the objective data and then you have the feeling. Don't forget to associate those two. And I think that's what a lot of runners don't do. They don't associate those two. They don't think to themselves, okay, this is what this pace feels like. Let me ingrain that so that I can duplicate that without the GPS. I can duplicate that in a race situation. So that's the threshold plus. The next fastest speed is the Vo2 Max training, the Vo2 Max intervals, where you're focused on improving Vo2 Max because you're focused on improving your cardiovascular system's ability, your heart's ability to pump blood and oxygen to the working muscles. That feels hard but manageable. So Vo2 Max intensity is quick, but it's not so quick that you can't hold it for very long. You know, for frame of reference, when you run a 5K, good runners who run a 5K at a little bit slower than their Vo2 Max pace. They may be like 15 seconds or so per mile slower than their Vo2 Max pace. For good runners, Vo2 Max pace will be close to 2-mile race pace. For the general population, it may be closer to 1.5-mile race pace. So when you do these workouts, you're not running that long. You may be running only half a mile at a time. So you're running half a mile at a time at the pace that you could hold for 1.5 miles to 2 miles. So that's why you can run many reps of the intensity, because you're only breaking it down into maybe half-mile reps at a time. So that should feel hard, but manageable. It's hard, so now the emphasis is on hard. It's difficult because Vo2 max pace is considerably above your threshold. If your threshold here, Vo2 max pace may be here. So anytime you're running above your threshold, there is an anaerobic contribution to that, and that's what makes it hard. Because it's all the side effects of anaerobic metabolism, the lowering of the pH. There's other metabolites that we accumulate, potassium ions, the hydrogen ions, which lower the pH. There's all these other things that happen that make it difficult. But that's why the segments of running are not going to be that long. Certainly not for as long as you could hold that pace. And that's why you do it as an interval workout, where you can run many reps at a shorter segment. So this should feel hard, but manageable. You may be only able to do 4 or 5 or 6 reps at 800 meters or 1,000 meters at that intensity. So the Vo2 max, you're running at your maximum capability, your heart's maximum capability for it to do its job. So your heart rate is close, if not at its maximum. So it feels hard, but still manageable. Okay? Because there is an anaerobic contribution, but it's not huge. It's still more aerobic than anaerobic, but there's still a significant anaerobic contribution. So your legs will start to feel heavy toward the end of each rep. Your whole overall body sense, it'll start to feel difficult toward the end of the second half of each rep, but it's still manageable. You're breathing very hard. Your heart rate is pumping as fast as it possibly can. It's very difficult, but still manageable. Okay? The next fastest pace is to train anaerobic capacity. So for very good runners, it'll be about 1 mile race pace, maybe even 3/4 mile race pace. For the general population, it may be closer to 1/2 mile to 3/4 mile race pace. So now we get into the true speed work, because now you're focused on a different energy system, anaerobic glycolysis. This is now the true speed work. So this feels fast. I'm going to use the word fast. I'm not going to use the word hard, because it's not as hard, the anaerobic training, because the segments that you're running are short. It may be 200 meters or 300 meters or 400 meters. It may be no more than 60 seconds at a time. So it doesn't necessarily feel hard, The Vo2 Max training is more difficult. It's harder because it's more metabolic. You know, the metabolic stress is greater for the Vo2 Max training than it is for the anaerobic training, even though you're using anaerobic metabolism. So it's still metabolic in nature. It's more metabolic because it's anaerobic metabolism, but it's not as difficult because the segments are short. Think of this as fast. You're running fast for a shorter period of time, maybe 30 seconds to 60 seconds. It's fast. You're lighter on your feet, you're cruising, it's fast, you're pushing the pace, it's fast, but it's not necessarily hard unless it's a longer rep. Like when you do 400 meter reps or 500 meter reps or 600 meter reps, that will get hard over the last maybe 30 seconds or so. So it is hard in a sense, but it feels fast more so than it feels hard. The way it feels hard is in the accumulation of reps, because you're dropping the pH of the muscle. You're causing acidosis, and you're having to deal with that acidosis on each consecutive rep. So it gets hard in that sense, that it becomes hard from the pace, but it feels more fast than it does hard. Okay? You're gonna be breathing very hard. Your heart rate will be very high, but it may not get to maximum. It depends on how long each rep is. So the Vo2 Max workouts are more challenging. They're more difficult because it's more of a strain. You're running at your cardiovascular system's maximum capability for it to do its job, and you're holding that intensity for 3 or 4 minutes. Whereas the anaerobic capacity training is much shorter. So it's hard, but it's short, so it feels fast. I keep coming back to that word. It's going to feel fast, and it'll feel hard as you accumulate a lot of reps and the pH drops in the muscle, and you're having to deal with that acidosis. Okay? The next fastest speed is anaerobic power. This is fun. This also feels fast. Now you're running almost as fast as you can, but you're doing it for a very short segment, 10, 15, 20 seconds at a time, no longer than that, no longer than about 20 seconds at a time. So think of if you were to do 50-meter sprints or 100-meter sprints. This feels very, very fast, but it's not that hard because this is not really metabolic at all. This is more neural. You're recruiting a lot of fast-twitch muscle fibers, and it's more about the neural aspect of speed. Okay, and the way I can equate this is think about if you were in a weight room, the difference between doing 10 to 15 reps per set versus doing 2 or 3 reps per set. You can think of the anaerobic power as doing 2 or 3 reps per set. It's not that hard. It's just intense. But it's not difficult because it's not as metabolically difficult because it's only 2 or 3 reps in the whole set. And so you can think of these short sprints as kind of the same way. It's very, very fast, but it's not that difficult because there's less reliance on the anaerobic capacity and on certainly on the aerobic system. There's no reliance on the aerobic system when you're just sprinting as fast as you can, other than the replication of that sprint. So where it becomes a little bit aerobic to do these workouts is the fact that you're repeating these sprints over and over and over again. And so the whole duration of the workout may be 15 minutes or so, or even 10 minutes. If you repeat 10-second sprints, the whole duration, the whole workout may take 10 minutes or maybe even less, maybe even 5 minutes, depending on how short your sprints are. But the fact that you're repeating it, that introduces a little bit of aerobic work in there. But the actual efforts are fast. You're cruising, it's fast. Okay? So there's the whole menu of workouts that you would do and how it feels. The gentle, aerobic, invigorating of the easy runs, then the comfortably hard of the threshold runs, the hard but comfortable of the threshold plus interval workouts, the hard but manageable of the Vo2 Max workouts, and the hard and fast of the anaerobic capacity workouts, and the very fast feeling that you're just grazing over the ground like a cheetah of the anaerobic power workouts, the pure speed work where you're developing pure speed. And like I said at the beginning of this, it's very important to understand how each of these paces, each of these speeds feel, so that when you go to the starting line of a race, you don't make the mistake that so many runners make of going too fast. If you really ingrain these different speeds, then you know what each speed feels like, And then when the race starts, or even when workouts start, because a lot of people, they run the first rep of an interval workout too fast as well, and the interval workout gets slower and slower and slower as the workout goes on. If you really ingrain what these speeds feel like, then you should be able to get to the point where you can duplicate that feeling without having to rely on the GPS. So you can use your GPS to give you the data so that you know what the exact pace is, what the speed is, but then remember to integrate that into your feeling, become cognizant of what that feeling is, so that you can then duplicate that for other workouts and certainly for races. There's a lot to be said for becoming a master of the pace, because when you become a master of the pace, you become a master of yourself. It's about self-control and self-regulating. And so that's perhaps the most important reason of being able to become a master of these different paces and understanding the feel. Because when you become a master of the pace, you become a master of yourself. And that has implications for lots of things in life, not just running. When you self-regulate your effort, your intensity, that helps you navigate life, because then you navigate life having self-control. When people don't do workouts where the workouts are up and down, the pace is up and down, or they go out too fast in the beginning and then the rest of the workout gets slower and slower and slower, it's because they have not been able to self-regulate. It's because they have not associated their feeling with the pace, and they haven't learned how to self-regulate. And so when you learn how to self-regulate, then you can control the effort, you can control the pace, and that will help you not just for running, but for everything else you do in your life, because self-regulation is extremely important. One of the books I wrote was on the habits of successful weight losers from the National Weight Control Registry, and one of the 6 habits is controlling yourself. The people who lose weight and who will keep it off for the rest of their lives, they have a lot of self-control. They have learned how to self-regulate and how to exhibit self-control. And so there's another area of life in which this self-control, this self-regulation helps, because it helps people to keep the lost weight off and not put it back on like so many people do. So there's a perfect example of how self-regulation, self-control, can help in so many other areas of your life. Right? So that's why I wanted to devote this episode to obtaining the feeling. And instead of relying on the GPS, I don't have to keep looking at your GPS to see what's going on. You should know what's going on, because you have developed this internal clock, this internal feeling. And so when you go do an interval workout or you go do a tempo run, you should know what it feels like. You shouldn't have to rely on this GPS on your wrist. You should be able to know what the feeling feels like. And I remember, Arthur Lydiard back in the day, when coaching New Zealand in the 1950s and 60s, when he was coaching Olympians and world record holders, he would have his athletes do time trials on the track at effort. He would say, run 3/4 effort. He wouldn't give them a time to shoot for. It was all based on it. This was well before GPSs even existed. And all the time trials that Arthur Lydiard had his athletes do, it was all based on effort. And so that's a good way to assimilate the feeling, is to run on effort rather than run always by the clock. And certainly the easy runs, that's the best time to do it. You're off the track, you're just running in nature, you run based on effort. But it's helpful to have the GPS these days, to have the data so that you can associate that effort with the pace. And you can match those two things up so that you can take that effort anywhere you go, anywhere around the world. I mean, I've run lots of times from hotels when we're allowed to travel. I run from the hotel, from the front door of the hotel, and I just go out and explore my surroundings. I don't have a GPS, and I just run based on effort. And it's a great way to explore. But over many years of running, I have developed this internal clock. I know at what pace I'm running, even without looking at any data. And so that's an important thing for you to learn. Don't get so caught up. Don't become a slave to the GPS. really learn what these different paces feel like so that you can duplicate them when it matters for a workout, and certainly when it matters for a race. Then everybody else will take the pace out in the race, they'll run too fast, and you'll catch them in the later stages of the race because you will have learned how to run a certain pace. You'll understand what that pace feels like. Okay? So thank you again for coming. And my thought for the day, this ties right into my, I finish every episode with a final thought of the day, and, to take you through the next week. And so this ties right into the thought that I want to share with you, is to learn self-regulation, in everything that you do, certainly not just running. Running is a small piece of who you are, but self-regulation, self-control, to learn how to control your emotions and control how you bring those emotions out to the forefront. That's a very important thing to learn in life. We all, as humans, oftentimes over exaggerate things, or we overcompensate to things, or we over emotionalize things, or we overreact to things. And it's very important to learn self-regulation, self-control, so that you can then allow you can allow yourself to be successful instead of allowing the emotions to get in the way. We often allow our emotions to get in the way of our relationships, of our business endeavors, and everything that we do. We allow our emotions to get in the way. We must recognize that humans are emotional beings, but it's important to be able to self-regulate those emotions so that you can thrive, that you can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, both in your business life and in your personal life. So self-regulation is my final thought for the day. So thank you for coming from our studios in Southern California. Don't forget to buy all my books and everything else I try to sell you. And we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot, guys.